What's going on, guys? This is Rob. If you guys enjoy my content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that little bell so you never miss out on my sexy voice. Okay, so normally when I go through and I run through like these stories, I usually try to like do them in chronological order. But in all honesty, the Perfect Storm story arc wasn't wildly interesting to me. There were cool elements of it, and we can cover it if you guys really want to see it. But I actually think this is cooler. I think this like Road to Flash War is a lot more interesting because I think what this does is it answers a lot of questions, or at least it really kind of brings out a lot of intrigue with regards to like what's going on in the Flash mythos, how it ties into Dr. Manhattan and the Watchmen, as well as like the backstory, like the whole idea of like Wally West and company and so on and so forth. And so the cool thing about this is what we do is we basically pick up in the aftermath of the Perfect Storm, in the sense that with Gorilla Grodd invading, Central City and so on and so forth, the city was almost destroyed. And so right now it's kind of in shambles and people are basically picking up the pieces. And that's really kind of where things reside. Now with the Flash family, they're able to clear up a lot of this stuff pretty fast, but it's still kind of a thing that's going on in the background. The issue with this is that what's been happening, or at least what took place during the events of Perfect Storm, is that Barry Allen freed Godspeed. And he did that because he needed Godspeed's help and the help of all the speedsters to defeat Gorilla Grodd. And so because of this, when I guess the investigation is being done, the question is, how did Godspeed get out? Now, of course, Barry doesn't spill any secrets because one, he'd have to reveal his identity as a Flash to his partner, and two, it would begin to ask questions on whether or not he's actually capable of doing his job effectively. And Kristen's not really in the know when it comes to that kind of stuff. As far as she's aware, she's just there with Barry Allen, and that's really about it. But Godspeed's kind of like the big catch, right? Like that's the big one, like the big baddie. It's almost kind of like a newer iteration of Reverse Flash that we can see a little more consistently than we do with the Reverse Flash character. But the idea here is that we basically pick up, following that whole investigation and that little bit of a revelation by Barry, we end up picking up with the idea of like Avery Ho speaking with young Wally West. Now, remember, Avery Ho was one of these characters that was hit with the Speed Force storm during the original Godspeed story that we covered, which I'll have the link in the description. You're welcome to check that out. But the idea was that there was this massive Speed Force storm and a whole bunch of people got Speed Force powers. And what this was is it was a way, and DC will do this occasionally, it was a way for Joshua Williamson to basically give speedster powers to everybody and then essentially go through and start eliminating people and then give us a couple new speedsters. But for Avery Ho, the reason why you haven't really seen her in the Flash stories is because what they did is once she went to like the kind of an academy of sorts and learned how to harness her abilities, she was ushered off to Justice League China. And it was a really cool idea. It was very similar to the idea of like Justice League International, right? Like you had the original Justice League team from 1960 that was canceled 25 years later in 1985. And then we got Justice League International post-crisis, which was Batman and basically people who couldn't sell their own comics. And so the result is that with the Justice League of China, they're actually selling pretty well. And it's an amazing story. I don't know how many of you guys are reading like New Superman, but it's really cool. It's a really fun story. But having a speedster on that team actually works out really well. Now, calling her in for this whole thing is a way to kind of bring her back in and remind us she's still very much a part of the Flash family. But that's why she's basically been out of the picture for most of this stuff. The other half of this is that the New 52 Wally West kind of seems to have a thing for her. So, it makes sense. I mean, they're just two young kids. But still, from here, we pick up with probably the most important part of this story. And this is the conversation that takes place between Wally, Barry, and Iris. Now, Iris knows Barry's the Flash. The issue with that is, in a lot of ways, Barry has consistently put himself in a position where it's like, I try to protect people around me by keeping that part of myself hidden. But the problem here is that Barry Allen and the Flash, and even Iris goes as far as to say it, you're the Flash, you're not Batman. You don't have to pretend to be two distinctly different people. The Flash does what he does because you are the Flash, because the Flash does what you would do because you do those things. I mean, it's a core part of who you are. And it's interesting because as they go through and they start to have this conversation, he reveals a Flash suit, and kind of brings all that stuff out to her. What she wants to know is who the Flash is about, what the Flash believes, how the Flash sees the world. And it's kind of cool because when you look at the character of Iris West, for the most part, she's on the outside looking in. You have a reporter and she sticks to her guns, all that kind of good stuff. And you've got Barry Allen who's running around on his escapades and so on and so forth. But she'll never be a speedster. Like she'll never really be a member of the Flash family insofar as actually having super speed. And so because of that, trying to sort of blend these two things together and get a much stronger and better feel for who Barry is, this is a conversation that's been long and waiting. And the other cool thing about this is one of the cool things I love about Joshua Williamson writing, is that the question she asks is like, what does the Flash listen to when he runs? And we end up finding out that he listens to Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is kind of cool. He listens to audiobooks while he runs. But yeah, so this is a conversation that's been long in waiting. And it's awesome because they just kind of profess their love for each other. And that's really what, in a lot of ways, fans have been waiting for. It's one thing for Iris to know that Barry's the Flash. It's another for her to know about Barry and all that kind of good stuff. But this kind of seems like a throwback to the way things should be, in the sense that it's the two of them together, you know, both halves of them kind of coming together and essentially making this cohesive whole that's very much reminiscent of the old Flash stories that so many fans grew up with. And so what ends up happening is you basically have Barry who simply says, like, this is the next step. The other thing I've done here is I've brought somebody else, and Wally West steps in. Now remember, ever since Wally West showed back up in DC Rebirth, he's really avoided Iris as often as he can. Because remember, Wally West is one of the only people, probably the only person, who really truly fully knows what's going on with regards to the fact that someone stole time from everybody's lives, presumably Dr. Manhattan, you know, that all those things were going on. And so because of this, when he looks at Iris West, he basically looks at a person that he's known for years and years and years out of his life, ever since he was a little kid, but she didn't really know who he was. And if he stepped into that role and said, hey, like, I'm Wally West and I'm your nephew, you know, and we've been family for so long, if she doesn't know who he is, that would be crushing. It was a way for Wally West to kind of live in isolation, to go back to his position as being the Flash, but avoid all the terrible things that would come along with essentially turning people's lives upside down. Because maybe Iris would have remembered, but what if she rebuked him? What if she was just like, no, I don't want to know any of this. I want things to go back the way they were before. That's what he was dealing with, and that's what he's dealing with now. Like, when he's here and when he, you know, starts to talk to her, he immediately turns away and he's just kind of like, I can't do this. We need to go somewhere else. And Iris stops him and says, I know who you are. You're Wally West. And this is amazing because for those fans, again, for those fans who grew up with the Flash, a little bit of a fun fact here. A lot of fans who are into the comics right now who grew up with the Flash, they grew up with Wally West. Post-Crisis with Mike Baron and Mark Waid and Grant Morrison and Jeff Johns, if you were reading Flash comics, you were reading Wally West. That's just the way it was. And so when you had fans who were watching, like, you know, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and so on and so forth, and they were watching the Flash, they were following Wally West. And a lot of fans got really attached to that. And the result was that when classic Wally West was wiped away, fans lost it because they felt like they lost a huge part of their life. And so with that in mind, like, seeing this take place, seeing this kind of reconciliation with Iris West, remembering Wally, you know, basically sort of coming back to a life that he's missed for so long, it's kind of a beautiful thing for older fans to see, you know, for fans of comics to see. Because what this means is that even if it's not all here, it means that pieces are slowly starting to click in place, that it's a slow game, that is basically Williamson giving us like this little piece here and this little piece there, and it all kind of comes together in this huge return of the Flash mythos as so many fans know it. And so what ends up going on is Iris asks the question, where's everybody else? And that's the important thing here. That is the important thing, because Wally remembers Linda Park. Wally doesn't remember Jai. He doesn't remember Iris. So at least there's no indication that he remembers his kids. And that's kind of funny because Jeff Johns tweeted out, why doesn't Wally remember his kids? And Williamson just immediately throws this in here. Now, I mean, I'm not saying one's correlated to the other, but it is kind of a cool idea because when the question is asked, it's like we as fans say, yeah, where are his kids at? How come he hasn't said anything to Linda Park yet? Like do that. And that's Iris's question. Where's Linda? Where's Jai? Where's Iris? Where is everyone? And then suddenly all of Wally's memories just start kicking in. And he simply just says, like, I remember everything. So what this indicates is that when Wally first showed up in DC Rebirth, he only remembered as much, you know, only a handful of things. But now, like, all these memories are pouring back. His time as part of the Teen Titans, his time facing off, or I guess meeting Eobard Thawne for the first time, when he married Linda Park, when he first got his powers. Presumably, when he and Linda had Jai and Iris, they had his kids. I remember everything about all this stuff. I remember my whole life. And this is awesome because what this is this Joshua Williamson opening the floodgates and saying, okay, it's only a matter of time before everything comes back. If you were concerned that you wouldn't see Jay Garrick anymore after the button, if you were concerned that you're never going to see Max Mercury, if you're concerned that you're never going to see Johnny and Jesse Chambers, then let me put those concerns to bed. You're probably going to see those characters come back, which is a welcoming thing because what it means is we'll have this speedster family, which now is about 3 or 4 people, that's going to explode up and probably end up with about 10. So we're going to have like this massive, you know, sort of return of all these different speedsters and this huge Flash mythos returning to the way that it was before DC rebooted everything back in 2011. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.